Konami just announced a full-blown remake of Silent Hill 2, along with some other projects like Silent Hilf, which looks suitably disturbing. I guess in addition to pachinko and fitness clubs, Konami's also getting into the hentai business.
Bruh.
Anyway, the Silent Hill 2 remake is pretty exciting, right? Not because of the game itself. I don't really care about this game at all, which is why I was debating whether or not we should even make this video. And I want to get to my main point, but I can't just say that without explaining myself, so... okay, so Bloober Team kinda sucks. Let's just call it like it is. We all know they're not gonna make a game that'll be good enough to revitalize the Silent Hill franchise. But in their defense, the original Silent Hill games weren't that great to begin with. You run around examining an array of doors with broken locks, and if you decide to use any of the ammo you've saved up, the aiming mechanics are so bad you're better off just flushing your bullets down the toilet. People like the Silent Hill series because they create a horror atmosphere like no other series does. And amazingly, it's thanks to that atmosphere that 2 and 3 still look great to this day. But I guess when it comes to these particular games, people are easily able to substitute that atmosphere for engaging gameplay in their minds. On the other hand, maybe I'm not the most qualified person to talk about this stuff. I played 1 through 4, but I've only finished 2 and 3 because the other two are terrible. Point is, there's a pretty high chance that the Bloober Team remake will have better actual mechanics than the original game, even if they drop the ball in terms of tone or emotional damage or whatever. I'm not exactly looking forward to it, but I'll still play it when it goes on sale, just for comparison's sake. So why is this exciting? Well, I'll tell you why I'm excited. Konami has decided to get back into the AAA games market, even though they really don't have a good reason to. If you look at their financial reports, the vast majority of Konami's revenue comes from mobile games. The money they make from console games could never even come close to that, which is exactly why the company decided to get out of that market in the first place. In order for a game to be considered successful, it has to sell at the very least double what it costs to make. It's unacceptable for the amount of profit to be less than the development cost, because that means the game didn't make enough to fund another project at the same scale or better. Take MGS 5 for example. Apparently, that game cost $80 million to make, which is actually dirt cheap for a AAA game in the modern era. For every copy sold at $60, Konami got about $20 on average, meaning that game needed to sell 4 million copies just to break even. In order to get the money for another $80 million game, MGS 5 had to sell 8 million copies at full price, but the last report Konami gave was that they only shipped 6 million. If you're trying to make money, that's a risky and stupid investment. So Konami deciding to hire a developer to get back into this market is a big deal. And a lot of people are hoping that this is going to open the floodgates to other IPs they've been sitting on. Maybe this means a Metal Gear remake could actually be a possibility in the future. Except no. A Metal Gear remake is simply not on the table. Not in the cards. Never gonna happen. For maybe another 3 to 5 years. Here's the thing. Hajimini Kojimini did something so stupid and embarrassed the company so badly that now Konami wants to erase the entire existence of his work. In that regard, Konami and I share a common goal. With the Silent Hill 2 remake, Konami was able to bring Akira Yamaoka and Masahiro Ito back from the original team. They can't really do that with Metal Gear because there are only 2 names that anybody recognizes from that series, Kojackass and Yoji Shinkawa, and both of them have their hands tied. But even if they didn't, Konami still has absolutely zero interest in working with either of them again. It's to the point where they don't even want Kojimbo's stupid ass listed in the special thanks section of the credits. So an MGS remake isn't going to happen until Konami decides to bury the hatchet. And that could happen, but, well, let's just see how Silent Hill 2 turns out. Almost as a response to the Silent Hill 2 announcement, Capcom released some gameplay footage for the upcoming Resident Evil 4 remake. The stuff they showed off looked amazing, but to me and another member of my team, it's still not good enough. RE4 is one of my top 10 favorite games, but it's also one of the most important games of all time. I say this every chance I get, but the over-the-shoulder camera you see in every game with a third-person shooting mechanic, that entire thing started with RE4. But the thing that made that game special is something called diegetics, and no, that has nothing to do with Scientology. In a diegetic user interface, elements of your heads-up display like your health bar and ammo capacity are represented by objects that actually exist within the world of the game. Say you were playing an FPS. Instead of floating numbers in the corner of the screen, your gun would have a physical display on it to tell you how much ammo you had left in your magazine. Think the pulse rifle from the Aliens franchise. A diegetic UI allows you to seamlessly blend your gameplay mechanics with your world building, and when done properly, it can enhance the immersion factor exponentially. In Resident Evil 4 and 5, there's no targeting reticle. You aim using the laser sight that's physically attached to the in-game weapon. This mechanic would later be perfected in the Dead Space series, which is why that franchise is now the paragon of diegetic user interfaces. For whatever reason though, when Shinji Mikami decided to make another survival horror game with the evil within, he dropped the laser sight, his own mechanic, from his own game, and instead went with an ugly, distracting targeting reticle. And then Remake 2, I guess, took inspiration from that game instead of the one that literally pioneered the camera system it uses. It boggles the mind. But that's not the only thing that bothers me about this remake. My main issue has to do with the engine the game is built on. Capcom's reach for the Moon engine and its reliance on scanning real-world people and objects for all the models just doesn't work for me. Instead of the iconic bomber jacket Leon wears in the original game, they bought a completely different $1,500 jacket and scanned that into the remake. There are two problems with this. First, Capcom actually made the original jacket. It already exists. They could have just scanned that. And the second problem is that the $1,500 jacket they bought is 3 whole sizes too big, so now Leon's running around Spain looking like George Costanza. I'm not done. The president's daughter looks gross. Not the face model they based her on, she looks great. I'm talking about this plastic ass, I'd like to speak to the manager ass wig they put her in. You heard of RBF? Well, in the Resident Evil 4 remake, Ashley Graham has FWS. Fucked up wig syndrome. Bruh. Speaking of things that are never gonna happen, let's talk about the Metal Gear Solid movie. On October 19th, Oscar Isaac talked about the project in an interview with comicbook.com. Here's what he said. "We want it to happen. Be excited. What's the script? What's the story? What's the take? Be hopeful that comes to fruition because there's so much potential for that. It's an incredible game. It's my favorite." That sounds an awful lot like what he told Ignorant Garbage News back in March.
Can you give us any update on Solid Snake and the preparation going on for that?
We're searching. We're searching like Solid Snake. We're climbing through air ducts. We're looking for the story.
And then the exclamation mark.
Exactly.
Now, it was announced that Oscar Isaac would play Solid Snake in December of 2020. That was 2 years ago. After 2 years, they're still trying to figure out how to make this movie. And you know what's funny? If you purposefully misinterpret the quote, it sounds like he's saying they don't understand Metal Gear's story. Yeah, you and everybody else, Izzy. They can't use the pandemic as an excuse because while the shelter-in-place order was in effect all across the world, you know what screenwriters had nothing but time to do? Write. So what's the holdup? It's possible that there have already been several drafts of the script that were finished but were rejected by somebody higher up the food chain. That leads me to suspect Konami is trying to sabotage the movie, like they did back in 2007 when they turned down a script written by the voice of Solid Snake himself, David Hayter. 15 years later though, the situation's changed. Even though Sony has the rights to make and distribute the movie, Konami's still the owner of the IP, so they have the final say in how their brand gets represented. And since they don't want to have anything to do with High Diddly Ho Jasmine Rice, they can run down the clock by rejecting scripts until the terms of the contract force them to make a decision. To me, and I think a lot of Metal Gear fans share this sentiment, but Jordan Vogt Roberts is the film director equivalent of Bloober Team. I don't think he's done enough to justify him being given the reins to this movie. The concept art he had his friend cobble together clearly demonstrates that he's not taken advantage of the opportunity he's been given. I take back what I said. A Metal Gear Solid movie isn't impossible, but it's never gonna happen under the current director. He's just too much of a fanboy, so he can't discern between the good and bad parts of the series and do what needs to be done to adapt it for the big screen. Even his concept art, having Gray Fox fight Gecko, tells you exactly what kind of movie it's gonna be. It's gonna be another Resident Evil-ass, Doom starring The Rock-ass shit show. The right way to do it is to eliminate all the iconic designs from the games altogether and do an original story, with a setting and mechs designed specifically for that project. You can have all the same characters, but the environments, costumes, and unmanned vehicles need to stand on their own, not just exist as fan service. It's like when Pyramid Head showed up in the Silent Hill movie. While that movie's perfectly watchable, it would have done a lot better critically if they had created their own monster, instead of trying to pander to the fan base. Interestingly enough, that's exactly what the team behind MGS Philanthropy did. Instead of just lazily lifting designs from the games, the art team custom-tailored all the visual elements for that particular story. Yeah, it was a terrible movie overall, but it was an independent, non-profit student film made on a shoestring budget. But they actually made a movie, something a Hollywood production studio with millions of dollars behind it apparently can't. So yeah, are we gonna get a big-budget MGS movie anytime soon? Nah. You can just forget about that. However, there are some things that can be done to increase the chances of an MGS movie getting made. I'm gonna have to talk about that another time. Alright, that's all I got for this one. The next one's gonna take another couple months because you don't support the channel on Patreon. Links in the description, and don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out.